A curious planet. The young woman. A young woman lived in the area of the city that was called the Courtyard. It was nowhere near as fancy as the palace or the affluent district, but affordable and not as run down as the docks. She lived alone in a decaying cabin that usually smelled of old cooking and dying flowers. Her cabin was located on the edge of the courtyard, hidden away enough from prying eyes. She had carefully chosen this cabin once she was old enough to move out of her childhood home. One of the reasons was because it had been in her price range, but maybe the main reason at the time was that she had turned into a bit of a crook. She was way too lazy to make an honest living, and any honest work didn't pay enough anyway. She had concluded a long time ago that it would take her way too long to save up to be able to leave this place one day, which she desired more than anything. She felt more and more out of place on this planet, and frankly, bored. The thought that there must be something more exciting out there grew stronger and stronger. She remembered stories from her childhood, told by a mysterious travelling young man that had knocked on the door of her childhood home. He had only asked to stay for one night in return for helping with the house chores. After dinner that night, they had all sat down around the fireplace, and he had told them about magical places and riches in abundance one could only dream of, and her parents later said it was just that, a dream. She also remembered being full of excitement and questions the next day after a good night's sleep, processing it all only to find that he was already gone and never seen again. Her parents had convinced her she had dreamt the whole thing, but she knew in her heart he had been there. After that morning, she never mentioned it again, but kept thinking, considering how great the sky seems to be, there must be something greater than this out there for me. She didn't know of any other family than her old parents, and she didn't care too much about it either. In her mind, they were boring, dry, and confusing. The day she moved out was a glorious day. All they could talk about was what they wanted her to become, and old weird stories that didn't make any sense. The young woman never really bothered with friends either, as she from a young age only trusted herself. She thought people were way too unreliable and emotional. Every morning she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of homemade tea, trying to come up with a plan. She had got the tea from a witch a few houses down, who claimed it was good for the brain and creativity. Not feeling very different, she started to wonder if she had been ripped off. As she hadn't really seen a commercial space shuttle for a very long time, she had to think of something else for her escape. Stealing a whole ship was out of the question, because even though she was clever and vicious, she never learned how to fly. Learning how to fly cost a lot of shiny pieces, and why waste them on learning when she could get someone else to do all the work for her? One idea she'd thought of was to hide in a ship if she could only find out about a pilot that was going far and wide. Another was to seduce a rich young man who regularly travelled. Either way, she would have to be clever and find out a lot of information, which also sounded like a lot of work to her. One option was, of course, to bribe someone to take her with them, but she had nowhere near enough shiny pieces to do that. At one point, she had even tried to find out where the shiny pieces originally came from to be able to steal plenty of them with no success. So she turned to petty crimes, such as robbing people in the street, and sold on whatever she could get her hands on. The richest people of the city would almost always send their servants to do their errands, and were rarely out walking themselves, so she didn't make too much that way either. And just the thought of breaking into a house in the affluent district or the palace was daunting, and she had no idea how she would go about it. Some nights when she felt stuck in her own head, she would go to a dark and dingy pub on the edge of the docks to clear it. There was a big hole in the roof that no one seemed to be interested in fixing, so sometimes it was both cold and wet inside. The barmaid had been the same for as long as the young woman had been going there and looked like she was about 400 years old. She never really cracked a smile. She smelled of forest and she always wore the same clothes. One night, sitting in her usual corner on a wooden stool, she overheard a curious conversation between a dodgy inventor that she had heard of and a character she'd never seen before. "I thought I knew all the villains in this city," she half mumbled to herself as she got a little bit closer.
So you're saying you're working on a new machine that will be able to turn people into basically whatever creature they desire?
Yes, I don't have it all worked out yet, but yes, that's the idea.
Yeah, I believe that when I see it. Isn't it dangerous, by the way?
Well, what is life without taking chances?
The inventor's friend grumbled and shook his head as he got up to leave. This sparked an idea, and she approached him. She wasn't exactly polite and liked to get straight to the point with anyone. So as she went over to the table, she slammed down a drink for him and said,
Hey, here's a glass of the house strong. Tell me all about your machine.